Alright, welcome to the review of One Night in Karazhan, the new Hearthstone adventure. I'm going to be starting off with the class cards, and then in part 2, I'll be covering the neutral cards. So let's get started with my favorite class, Druid. So first up, we have Enchanted Raven. Enchanted Raven is an interesting early game card. I think that in some cases it could be a replacement for Living Roots as an anti-aggro. The reason I say is because Living Roots is an extremely well-made card. It's definitely better than Enchanted Raven, but Enchanted Raven has a lot more ramp potential, and it also defends you against some of the non-aggro decks. Living Roots might help you trade a little better into a Hunter or into a Warlock, but Enchanted Raven will probably help you trade a little bit better into a Mage or into a Rogue or even maybe a Shaman. The reason being because it won't die to just the hero power. That's a big downside, and also because you have the turn 2 insane potential to buff it with Mark of Yasharaj. That's insane synergy considering this has the Beast tag. A 4/4 on turn 2 and you drew a card is probably something that maybe just make your opponent surrender. I don't know. I'm not saying this card's amazing because of that, but because it has, of course, 0 late game potential essentially, unless you wanted to use it just to, I don't know, cycle a card, or you just throw it down there and buff it with Violet Teacher and something else. But you know, you just help spam the board. But otherwise, late game, it's pretty much nothing. Next up, we have Moonglade Portal. So this card is really interesting to me. I think that it kind of fills Ancient of Lore's shoes. Ancient of Lore had some pretty big shoes to fill when it was nerfed and essentially taken out of competitive play. It used to draw 2 cards every time, and would also provide a 5/5 body for 7 mana. Now that's extremely powerful. Sometimes you did have the option to use the heal, which, you know, that's great. I mean, more options is always better. But when that was nerfed down to just drawing 1 card, people didn't see it being worth the 7 mana anymore. Here we go. We have a 6 mana card, and 6 mana cards are something that Druid doesn't have too many options of, so it's not bad. It's 1 less than 7, and 7 has a lot of other good options that you can play across the board, or even combos of cards that you can play. And so being at the 6 mana slot, it's not that bad, and it heals for 6, so that's 1 more than Ancient of Lore healed. And it also summons a 6 mana minion. 6 mana minions aren't actually that bad of a pool. I mean, you've got Sylvanas, you've got Karazhan. 6 mana minions are pretty solid compared to some of the other pools of minions, like say 5, which have a lot of tool type minions, which I'll get to a little bit later. But Druids often can reach that 6 mana turn. I feel, as a Druid player myself, I feel they can reach that 6 mana turn, but what happens is they are a little too low on health, so they don't want to keep hitting with their face with their hero power, and they might have like an even neutral or possibly an even a losing board state. So something like this, if you're against an aggro deck, it might just give you a little bit of umph in your heal, put you back above 20, maybe more, and it also, you know, puts a minion on the board. And if you're against a control deck, then simply just save it and play it later. And I think you'd be in a good shape. So overall, I'd love to try this card, and I'm a little excited for it. Sadly, compared to some of the other Portal cards, it's a rare, so you're not going to be getting it in Arena much. Druid, unfortunately, still seem to suck in Arena. Alright, Menagerie Warden. This card, it's interesting. I mean, the Beast archetype in Druid in general, I know I was kind of talking the 1 mana card up a bit, but the Beast archetype in general isn't the best. You play this after Druid of the Claw, and you might get some awesome benefits. But the problem is, aside from that, there's not really the greatest beasts available to Druid unless you're looking at wild format. Wild format, there's snakes. You know, copy a 7/7 minion for 6 mana would be pretty sweet after you played him, because he's only 5 as well. So That would be great for wild format. So possibly this is an arena helper. I'm really seeing Beast Druid kind of come out in arena because a lot of good cards are actually very arena friendly as their commons. So Beast Druid might be a thing in arena. I don't know if that's going to push them up that high, but as far as constructed goes, we're getting more interesting. I mean, Blizzard is definitely making interesting cards. One other good thing, though, however, is that Druids tend to be given stats cards. So what I mean by that is just all the cards are just big, beefy monsters. So when it comes to that, in future design and even what's out currently, since this card just simply copies the card you already played, you're not going to get things like a battle cry effect again. So having big stats on the board is good when you're not going to get whatever effect that card gave when you played it. So in that sense, this does kind of fit right into the Druid archetype. Whether I'm happy for it or not, whether I'll use it a whole lot, I'm not too sure, but it definitely, could have potential in the future. Alright, next up we have some Hunter cards. I don't really have a lot to say about this card. Hunters don't really need more early game pressure, I feel. And being a 1/1 in the beginning, it's definitely strong, and it has a beast archetype, so you can buff it after this. That's amazing. It's an amazing N'Zoth Hunter card. A lot of hunters are running N'Zoth because there's some amazing death rattles in the Hunter class. It's amazing for arena. It's a common card. I mean, yeah, overall, I feel like this card is pretty great, but overall, I don't know if it was that needed, if it was that important, etc., because there are other great early game cards that hunters already possess. So I'm not too excited about this card, but it's not really a bad card, so I think it will absolutely see play in Constructed and, of course, in Arena. Cloaked Huntress. So this card, a lot of people, from what I read on forums and such, were already ragging on this card because it pertains to secrets. And maybe that's just because it's in the early steps. I don't know. Maybe it has a bad feel if you try playing it once this is released. We'll see. But overall, I mean, it does have nice stats. They're not bad for a 3-mana card. It trades into a lot of other 3-mana cards that have effects, and your secrets cost 0. That's pretty amazing. I mean, Hunter secrets only cost 2 to begin with, so it's not that bad. But when you think about a Yogg or a Lock and Load, I mean, if you've ever played Lock and Load in a Hunter, you get a fair number of secrets, and you're playing each of those at 2 mana a pop, so it's not that bad. But if they cost 0, you could just play all the secrets you wanted, and you'd be getting a ton of extra free cards. Not to mention Yogg Druids are somewhat popular right now. It's like a Yogg, Lock and Load, Reno style Hunter deck. Sorry, I think I said Druids. Hunter deck. Yeah, it's a Yogg Lock and Load style Hunter deck that's actually pretty popular, and I think the ability to spam the secrets out is pretty beneficial for that. And it's interesting because Blizzard's also taking a design step toward more secret cards. So we'll see the secret support if it keeps coming in the future, or if this is just kind of the spell-based, couple expansions they're doing. And speaking of secrets, hunters actually were lucky enough to get another secret. Believe it or not, I would have liked to see another mage secret or even a paladin secret. Paladin secret is so lackluster, and it would be really cool if you could play paladin secret without just being ridiculously gimmicky, but at the 1 mana slot it's unfortunate. You can't make too good of secrets. Here we go though. Hunter secret being only 2 mana, of course. It doesn't seem too bad. I mean, it's a new secret, so you can play it with the prior card, gives you 1 more spell to add into the, like I said, the Yogg, Lock and Load, Reno style deck. And depending on how this effect resolves, it could be good, it could be worthless. Let's say your opponent plays Arcane Missiles, this triggers. Do 2 of the Arcane Missiles hit the card, or instead would it be your opponent plays Arcane Missiles, they all hit your face or whatever else, and then this card procs. The ordering of things like that really matter. Will your opponent play Flame Strike, and then you actually get this card after the Flame Strike has resolved, so you're still left with a board? Or instead, will your opponent play Flame Strike, this card procs, and the Flame Strike just kills it as well. So depending on the ordering of things, this card I think can either go between great or just garbage. But again, it does summon a beast, so that's not bad. Giving you a 4/2 stealth minion isn't that bad. So we'll see what direction this card takes in the upcoming weeks once the expansion is released. Mage cards. First up, we have Babbling Book. Babbling Book is pretty good for Yogg, Lock and Load. The thing is, though, do mages really need more spells? They have a lot of cards to generate spells in their hand, both by drawing or by discovering or just giving random spells and things like that. So do they need more spells? Maybe not. If you're going to play more of a control mage, a Reno mage, something like this, having more early game pressure, especially if it's a Reno mage where you can only really play one Mana Worm, because Mana Worm is better for the most part. But, as I said, why not both? If you're playing a Reno Mage, you want to have Mana Worm, but why not have Babbling Book as well? Babbling Book and Mana Worm, if you drew it later, you could play them both on turn 2, a turn 2 or 3, you could play this on turn 2 and also ping something. There's a lot of combinations. If you can get this out early, adds a spell to your hand at random. There's a lot of great lower cost spells, so considering you play this on turn 1, it dies on turn 2, you have a pretty good likelihood to get a spell that you might be able to play and use on either turn 3 or turn 4. So overall, it's interesting. Here we have Medivh's Valet. So again, we're directing back to the secret pattern that seems to have happened with this expansion just a bit. Possibly more power in Arena for Mage. It's a common slot. There's lots of good secrets that show up when you play a Arena Mage. And having something that deals 3 damage along with that, I mean, you really can't complain. The card only costs 2 mana. You deal 3 damage, so that's already better than most of the spells. I mean, you have Frostbolt, but that has a freezing effect as well. But you have Frostbolt to deal 3 damage. But here we've got a monster that'll deal 3 damage for only 2 mana, and all you have to do is have a secret up. There's plenty of secrets that your opponent won't proc right away. Oftentimes they live a turn, especially if you have an ice block, which every mage runs anyway. So I actually see this card being decent for anti-aggro, decent in Arena, and overall it's a different approach to mage decks again. I mean, with the absence of some of the secret support that we had in the past, secret decks and things like that needed a little bit of extra oomph, and so maybe with things like Kirin Tor Mage, we'll see more secrets played in Mage instead of just Ice Block. Okay, Firelands Portal. This card is amazing for Arena. Pretty much everyone has been commenting on that. It's a common card. It does damage. It does something. It summons a minion. Overall, that's pretty amazing. 5 mana minions, though, however, are often what I'm calling toolkit minions. And I mentioned that term earlier. Basically, I'm referring to minions that have lesser stats but stronger effects. Think Big Game Hunter. Big Game Hunter falls into that category. Do you want, if you're behind a little bit on board state, do you want to deal 5 damage? Yes, kill a minion of your opponent's, but then you summon a Big Game Hunter that didn't get to use its effect, is a 4/2, and is easily going to die to your opponent's weapon or whatever little minion they have left over. So overall, the 5 mana minion that is being summoned, not that great. But here's the catch, though. This is in Mage. It's not in Druid. If this was in Druid, I think I'd be extremely disappointed. 7 mana is way too high. Druids would lose the game already. 5 damage isn't a big deal, and a 5 mana minion is not a big deal either. But this is in Mage. Mages have lots of options. If your option is not available to you to play a card like this, then you simply don't have to. And I wouldn't run necessarily 2 of these in your deck. I would run probably just 1. So in a Reno deck, it could work. Even in a regular control mage deck, it could work, just to provide a little extra tempo if all you need is 5 damage. Because if you think about it, I mean, you're basically dealing 5 damage for 2 mana, which is pretty good. I mean, 5 damage for 2 mana is great. So, if you can play it, great. If you can't play it, then you have other spell options as a mage, most likely. It's just a phase.